Johnny, how are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm really good, thanks, mate. It's Sunday evening, as you know, so I start thinking about Monday morning and what
Mm.
what my week's looking like, really.
Okay, what's the week looking like?
Studio mainly this week, so tracking some stuff tomorrow, and then I'm working on an album with somebody Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So yeah,
Okay,
mainly studio this week.
okay. Which studios you in?
Big Jelly in Ramsgate in Kent.
Okay,
With Mike Collins, and that's a really great. It's an old chapel, really cool space.
nice.
And then the other one is with William Rees. William, he's great. He was in Mystery Jets,
Okay,
so he's working on his own solo album, which I don't even know if he would have announced that. So, but yeah,
okay.
but that's
That's
in
an
his own space.
nice. Okay. And how did you sort of work your way into this studio session drummer thing?
Good question. I,
Because I
I
know you came up from Somerset.
did come up from Somerset. I moved up when I was 26,
Yeah.
so I grew up playing in bands. Actually, like that was the thing. It was bands, and it was I didn't go to uni or college or anything like that. So really, kind of was just always doing it for the love of it. And then
Yeah.
26 moved to London. Didn't I literally knew a couple people, and I guess studio wise, like people often ask me about that, and it can be quite a closed door. Um,
Mm.
and the only reason I think that is because people like using people that they know can get the job done. You know, there's a lot of time restraints as well and things like that. So I think it's about I got very lucky. I got an opportunity, and then I worked with his next door neighbor, and it's like I think it's that situation. You need experience to get the experience.
Mm.
So I got very fortunate with my first opportunity, probably back in would have been about 2014,
Okay.
so about 10 years ago, and I was working a lot in Tile Yard in King's Cross, and I met a few guys, and then that just kind of built. And then I guess there's opportunities through. Sometimes there's people I've toured with; they want me to play on their record, and yeah, I've built up some really great relationships with some amazing producers, and I feel very grateful for it actually because it was always something I wanted to do, and it
Yeah.
just started happening. So yeah, I really love it. I love being creative. I love working on sounds, and I love sort of having a body of work that I'm a part of released.
That's cool. I mean, I think the word that jumped at me there was relationships. I think so much of what we do is based so much on relationships, maybe even more so than technical ability and playing and stuff like that. If you get on with someone well, you like having them around, you're more likely to call them. And I've always said I'd rather have someone on a gig that I get on with better than someone who is a better player, but I just don't really like them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the biggest factors for most people, and I think if anything, actually, I think sometimes as we're coming up in the industry, we focus a lot on making new connections, right?
Hmm.
Whereas I think the thing that we actually forget is nurturing the ones we have.
Right.
That's a big thing, and I also mean it in a very. I think it should always be authentic as well. I
Yeah.
think it's very clear when you meet somebody and they're just after something, but I think if you can actually build a relationship and you connect for an authentic reason, I think that probably has more value. Um, but yeah, rather than always thinking what's next, I
Yeah.
think what's key is like looking what's around us and going, how can I build that? How can I,
Hmm.
um, utilize those relationships? So yeah, and maybe not too much put too much weight on it, but I think we're always looking forward rather than like right in front of us a lot of
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah.
So a lot of my calls are regular calls,
Hmm.
studio wise, even live as well, but studio definitely a lot of regular calls.
Yeah.
So I want to really, for me to nurture that is to make sure that hopefully I can fit it in my diary. Um, and every time I go there, I don't think you can get complacent just because I know I've done a good job with them before, or they've enjoyed working with me or hanging out with me. Look, I mean, if I go and do a bad job, they're not going to call me the next time.
Hmm.
So look, you're right. I think the playing is a given.
Yeah.
I think especially as I've got a little bit older now. Like I think it was different when I first moved to London in my 20s, but as I'm a little bit older. I think the thing for me is that people know we can go and do the job. Of course, I'd like to think we all have attributes that are our strengths and things like that. But yeah, I think they want to know that they can work with you, and whether it's on the road and spend time with you, or if it's in the studio, um, like that's a lot of hours sometimes.
Yeah, yeah,
You know.
yeah. And when we talk about nurturing relationships, is there anything like how do you approach that? I mean, is it just about just being pleasant and nice, or just reaching out every now and again?
Well, I imagine there's like different versions of that. I think. Look, I mean, I could give a few examples, but one would be not to get complacent and be like, "Oh, I'll fit them in my diary." Actually, I like to, where possible, prioritize people that I've worked with a lot, and I enjoy working with.
Hmm.
Um, that's a huge compliment when somebody calls us back, right, and goes, "Hey, I really like what you did, or I've seen you play. I really like what you do. Would you like to come and do this?"
Yeah,
There's the biggest compliment for me.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, nurturing in a way of still respecting it. I think that people have a habit, or younger musicians, maybe when we were younger, it was about right the next thing. So you
mm,
almost forget the thing you've got, right?
yeah,
We're actually, I think it's about respecting what you've got, and really appreciating what it is. And I think if you can treat it with that kind of in mind of being grateful, I think I'd like to think that you can continue those kind of relationships.
yeah. Yeah, it's good. I mean, and you said you weren't like a school musician, you didn't do college or university. So, what was your kind of your musical upbringing, and how did you get to not necessarily where you are now, but sort of what was your music education?
Well, I feel there's probably some key points in the timeline for me. So the first one for me is I started playing when I was 10, and I don't know if you know Phil Beaver. He was the drummer in Inglorious.
Okay.
Phil was one of my best friends, and I saw him play at school, and I was like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
And Phil was one of those musicians that we were 10, and he played drums, and then he just picked up a guitar and he could just play.
Right.
So so instantly I'm around this musician who was just phenomenal. Like he was playing with guys much older when he was 10. Like he honestly he's a really special musician. So I was just around someone who was brilliant really early on. So he was a huge sort of starting, huge factor in me starting and me progressing. And honestly, I can't explain how good he was at that age. It's kind of ridiculous.
Okay.
And he's still one of my absolute best friends now, which is really nice. Um, and then when I was about 15, 16, I was working in a music shop in Taunton in Somerset. Good times. I really, really love those times actually. And anyway, there was a guy that rang up and said, "Do you know a drummer? We're looking for somebody." I was like, "Well, I play drums, so I'd be interested." So I was sort of gigging when I was sort of 15, 16 in pubs with this
Okay.
band. And they were kind of like a heavy rock band. They're all in their 40s. So like it was a big age gap, especially when I'm
Right.
15, 16. I'm sure when my mum sort of would pick me up from rehearsals, we'd rehearse in like a skittle alley in a pub or something.
Yeah.
She'd probably be like, "Oh goodness, what's he getting up to?" But again, I was very fortunate. My parents really nurtured my love for the instrument. And then I was in bands. I was just always in bands. There was never a
Hmm.
time I wasn't. So they were really important times for me. And then 26, I moved to London, and I kind of just figured that I really wanted to make music, my living if I could, and I felt like being in a band. I kind of lost the dream a little bit.
Right.
Um, so amongst that, I guess in terms of education, I had a few lessons at the age of probably 14, 15. Um, but the teacher, I think he used to come around. I used to put on a CD player and just play along to songs.
Mm.
So that I guess I didn't really have a lot of formal education. Um, I definitely had a few more lessons when I was sort of 18, 19. I was sort of I was really intrigued by the instrument. Like I said, I was always playing in bands, and I think that was a really good schooling for me. But I didn't, I could read a little bit and things like that.
Yeah.
So I had some great experiences. Like I started depping at a hotel in Somerset, and that was sight reading. and I thought I could read, and I, you know, there's a big difference between being able to read at home and then going on stage and someone's going, actually, we're going to do this song next, and I've got, it's before iPads, like there's paper on the floor.
Mm.
Yeah, basically, actually, I mean, it's a story I like sharing. I was, I was on this gig, first time sight reading. I was about 21. So I was teaching a bit as well, sort of younger drummers, and it was, I was seeing crotchets and quavers and semi-quavers every day, and
Mm-hmm.
so I was familiar with it. But there's a different thing of like looking at a chart, getting lost, and all these things. And so I was on the gig, and it was, like I said, it was all paper charts, and we're doing the first song, and in the in-ears, the keyboard player's like, "Oh, we're going to do this one next." Bear in mind, I haven't got a set list next to me, so I'm playing one-handed, completely lost on this chart. I have no experience in this as well, so add all that together, it's it's a bit of a stressful situation. So I find the chart. So let's say it's track 5. So I take charts 1 to 4 and chuck them on the floor. And why would I need that?
They're
Like,
done. We're finished. Yeah.
I was like, well, we're going to keep moving through the set.
Yeah.
So we do that, and then we're playing. And next song, he's like, "Oh, we're going to do this one next," and I'm like, "I don't know why I can't. Why can't I find the chart?" And Billy, Billy was a really great friend. We unfortunately lost Billy over Christmas.
Oh, sorry to hear
But
that.
he was a really great influence on me. But he also had a talk back, and he just went, "Jonny, I think that one's on the floor." So at this point, I'm now one-handed, trying to read a chart that I'm already lost in, so I might as well give up. And I'm trying to reach down on the floor, trying to grab these charts. Oh my goodness! Like the stress. So I remember going home, and I rang Miles, the drummer.
Mm.
I was like, "Dude, I'm not doing that ever again.
I'm not cut out for that."
Yeah,
That seems like a really unfair thing to do. If you've got a depth drummer on and you've got paper charts, you then start calling shit out of sequence. I think the MD's got a responsibility to be looking over at the drummer, going, right, he's having a bit of a nightmare. I think I need to try and make this a bit easier for him, just to settle him in a bit.
I think more reason for him to do it. I think he knew what he was doing.
Okay.
Look, the best way to learn is on the job. I do believe that. So I went home, and I was living at my parents' house at the time, and I was like, never doing that again. And I was just overwhelmed, and it was too much. Anyway, a few months later, Miles calls me, and he's like, "I really need cover." And I'm thinking, firstly, if I had the experience I had now, you just wouldn't expect that call ever again. You'd be like, "There's no way this guy's calling me again." I don't even need to tell him I don't want to do it. He isn't calling me. He calls me. Obviously, there's not a lot of opportunity. There's not a lot of musicians, and there's not a huge amount of opportunities down in Somerset. So there's a small scene, I guess. And I was like, yeah, why not? I tried to work on my reading a little bit, realized it wasn't good enough, and I went in, and I was a completely different player because I had the experience to know not to chuck charts on the floor.
Yeah.
I knew Billy taught me that so the best reading musicians are listening.
Yeah.
And I think that's the one thing I always say about reading, if you're on a reading gig, is that somebody in the audience isn't reading a chart with you and going, "Oh, okay, they've got this feel coming up. Oh, he played it differently."
Yeah.
So my approach now is that, or what I learned at that time was, here's my guide map, and there's a few markers, signposts along the way that are going to be like, I want to try and catch a figure or something similar. But ultimately, I'm playing music. So I believe that your biggest tool reading music is your ear, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of learned a few things like that. But really, my education was, a couple lessons here and there. But being surrounded by inspiring people in bands and just absolutely loving playing. I was just listening to records playing non-stop. I was just one of those kids, one of those teenagers that I just couldn't wait to get home from school and play drums. That was me, really. And so, and although now I feel, because of the experiences I've had over the years, now I would do a reading gig and I wouldn't even think about it. And like a studio feels very comfortable to me now. but they all came from those experiences of like the sight reading gig or being in a band and recording and all these things. I think all those experiences took me to where I am now. And then obviously moving to London, you get to work with great players. I mean, my first gig was with Neil Fairclough on bass, who's
Okay.
Queen's bass player, and it was like I remember being like, that's a bass player.
Yeah.
So that was an eye opener to me because suddenly I'm playing with somebody who's phenomenal,
Mm.
and I guess in many ways, coming from a very small place in Somerset, you move to London, you're a really really small fish in a really really big pond.
Yeah.
Uh, but you learn even quicker when you're in that situation, I think.
Yes, absolutely. So it's funny when you said about, when you're doing reading gigs and you've kind of, it's more like a roadmap. I spoke to a couple of players recently and sat in with a few players, and I talked to them about the charts and the dots and everything. And they're like, yeah, well, I'll learn it. And then as the show goes on, I'm just getting further and further and further and further away from what's written on the chart. I'm just kind of doing my own thing. And if the MD wants me to pull it back, I'll pull it back. But he said, I'm largely, it's literally, it might as well just be a chord chart for me, and I'm just kind of doing my own thing. I was like, wow, because I always just assumed that you just play everything that's written, do the dot as written, as per the page. And like, no, I'm off. I go off my own thing. I was like, that's really interesting.
Well, I guess it changes in each like environment. Like, that can be down to is it your chair?
Mm,
So you've got a bit more freedom to maybe do that. What's the MD like? What does the MD want? Are there certain things that, if we're talking specifically theatre, are there certain things that dancers are catching?
yeah,
Um, there's just a lot more to it when you're in a setting like that, where it's just not just about the music; it's about the whole show performance, and
yeah,
it's the same with any gigs. Like sometimes there are gigs that has complete freedom,
mm,
and that's great. And I love exploring those places. But also, there's times it's absolutely about discipline.
yeah,
And I think both are great, and they both have a different purpose. So I think it's understanding your role, and then if you feel like you've got a bit of freedom to like reach out a little bit, then do it.
yeah,
But I think it has to be. It needs to be tasteful, and it needs to be considerate of your environment and the gig. It would
yeah.
be
I mean, I think that's
my
true of all gigs, whether it's a reading gig, a theatre gig, function gig. You're playing with an artist, so long as what you're doing is it fits with what you're doing. Are you playing the right thing at the right time at the right moment?
and does it feel good?
Yeah.
Other
Does
people
it sound
around.
good?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the
That's,
biggest thing in
that's
my
the
opinion.
acid test. Does it sound good?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's the biggest thing for me. Like, also, I think great players make other players sound good.
Mm,
So it's always really, people talk a lot about being not having to be the greatest person in the room because actually you get to grow at that point if you're
yeah.
not. But yeah, being with great players, you suddenly go like, "Wow, I sound good tonight," But
Mm,
it's what everybody brings because everyone's placement of something like that, And look, it could be a whole series if we were going to talk about groove and time, and I feel like I'm forever learning that kind of stuff.
mm,
But I think when people talk about groove and they go, "Oh, yeah, is the drummer grooving or is so and so grooving?" Look, we're all a team here at this point,
yeah.
so we all have to groove. Like it's a collective. So I feel really strongly about that stuff. Same with time. When someone looks around, and be like, "Oh, I think we might have been speeding up." It's like, well, yeah, we might have been, but it might have been because of you.
Mm,
It might have been because of me. But also, I have a bit of a relaxed feeling on time, and what I mean by that is, yes, I want things to have great time, and I'm always working on my time. But sometimes things need to move,
mm,
and if we want to be so specific about time, just get a metronome, put a
yeah.
click on, and then no one's going to be worrying about time.
No, no, yeah.
So I feel like if things have to be exact, and obviously there are plenty of situations where they do need to be, i.e., there's track. Okay, well, we need click and track, and that's going to be
Mm,
covering certain areas. But if someone's like, we don't want click because we don't want to be here, because for some reason people think click holds you back.
Mm.
That's again, and I don't want to go down all these different kind of subjects, but it's like, well, if you feel that strongly about it, then make sure you don't turn around afterwards and be like, oh, I think we played that a bit fast. It's like, well,
Well, yeah, you can't have it both ways.
we're human. We're gonna things are gonna move,
Yeah.
And but my kind of feelings on that has changed over the years because there was a time when I was so worried about time and being like, oh, I hope my time's good here.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that probably restricts players when you start overthinking it. So I try and trust my ears more and more. And look, if you're in a situation, someone's like, I think we sped up, we might not have done. It's
Mm.
just someone's opinion on where they feel the time was. It's just such an interesting topic, and so I'm quite relaxed with those things now. Um, Look, obviously, if you're in a situation the artist feels like things are speeding up, slowing down, then you have to really take that on board and be like, okay, how can I adjust and things like that.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I think I kind of see it as an energy. So are we forward motion? Are we kind of holding back? And I learned a lot of stuff like from Ralph Salmons on that stuff. If we're talking again about education, I've had a handful of lessons with Ralph over the years, who is firstly brilliant, secondly a joy to be around. I used to leave those lessons and be like, my God, I feel really good about myself
Good.
because Ralph was that not only as an educator but as a person. Being in a room is, we talk about building relationships. Well, I think anybody, any instrument could learn a lot from Ralph because he's a joy to be around. And yeah, so I learned. Um, we talked a lot about time and feel, and he's been on some great gigs, and and had some some challenging environments that he's had to be like, okay, well, I need to do this or that, and like that's so inspiring to hear that from somebody who's still working on their playing after all these years.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you know Ralph
I
or
don't know. No.
yeah, he's
I'll
one
get him on. I'll get him on.
yes, he's one of the, in my opinion, he's one of the UK greats.
Okay. And when you mentioned about, people still working on their playing, I mean, how do you approach, working on your playing at the moment? Do you still do practice? Do you still want to push yourself to get better, or are you just kind of happy with where you are and maintaining it? And what's it like now?
Well, I think for probably most of us, I don't know if we're ever just going to be happy.
Yeah.
I think that's partly what makes us a musician, or a creative, where I always want to be better. It
Mm,
takes hard work, and I go through phases. So, look, what I will always try and do is ride a wave.
yeah.
So, if I've got time, then yes, I want to be practicing. I think what I maybe struggle with, or maybe where I could add some discipline, is when things get a little bit busier. It's hard to go, okay, I'm still going to practice every day.
Mm,
So if I've got a bit more time and I'm really feeling that wave of inspiration, I will practice every day, and it's a struggle to get me off the drums, and I love it. And I definitely in recent times have really focused on having a plan. So
okay.
rather than just turning up to my drum room and being like, okay, I'll play some drums today,
Mm,
which is also fine, but it's a different thing. So I would more likely now have some things printed off that I want to work on, have a bit of a goal. And the way I learn, and not just in music, but with everything, is that I like to know why I'm doing it.
hmm.
I need a reason. Otherwise, it feels aimless to me.
Okay.
And that's not to say it is. But if someone says to me, "Oh, you should really work on this," I also need them to like follow up with because
Because, yeah.
that's just how I work anyway.
Yeah.
And I can be really stubborn with myself. So I just have to make sure that I counteract that with, okay, I know why I'm doing this. I have a reason. But I'll ride a
Mm,
wave. So if I'm working on something specific, or working with a, I don't know, a band or an artist or something like that, probably what style that is will dictate how I'm feeling musically.
okay.
Just because I will be diving in and I'll be thinking about everything from sounds to how I'm playing it, how I'm hitting the drum. So I think a lot more deeper than I would have done when I was younger, where it was just his I don't know, a page of exercises, which
Mm,
really has its place. But for me, the key thing that we've spoken about before is for me is always
Yeah.
listening to music, but like consciously listening. So not just putting on a record and just sitting there and chilling. I'm saying like put on a record and I would listen to a track and I think, okay, like are they playing rim shots? So they're playing center of the drum.
Hmm.
How do I think I could create that sound? Are they playing the edge of the hat? So they're playing the tip slightly open. What hi hats are they? So I like things like that, or like beater on, off. What kind of dampening? And I think that's probably where I really, really love working in the studio. That's what
Mm.
I love working on sounds, and I love thinking, okay, we need to create this. I love references. When someone goes, oh, I really love this sound. So I
Mm.
go, okay, cool. I think I would use this drum, and I would probably do this tuning. And so learning for me often is work related, not solely, but it is often it's work related. So then I'll do a lot of listening. So I just done a record with a band called Professional in a couple of weeks ago, and so when I got the call, I sort of heard the demos with a great producer, Danton Supple, um, who's again just brilliant to work with, and I think great producers bring the absolute best out of you. I
Yeah.
really believe
Yeah.
that. So Danton for me is one of the best. He's really great. Um, so I got the demos. So there was a drummer before, so they had some rough demos with actual drum parts on.
Okay.
That's sometimes a bit of a different approach because there's already parts there, and then you got to figure out like, am I just playing what's there, but I still want to put my touch on it
Mm.
if I genuinely believe it's better,
Yeah.
and it's art, so that's up for debate, that's for
Yeah.
sure. Um, so yeah, I tend so that for that record, I got really into some records that kind of reminded me of. So I kind of dug into those records, and I considered how I might get that sound, and I was also trying to get inspiration for parts.
Hmm.
I just wanted to bring lots to the table. So if someone goes, oh, I'm kind of feeling this, or what would you change there? I find if I dig deep into records that stylistically are similar, I think it just gives me more to work with. I'm going, actually, I might try that thing, and I'm not saying I don't want to be ripping anything off, but I do want to be inspired.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say the biggest thing for me out of all my practice I do is 100% is listening. If I get some time, I'm generally listening to something. And like today, I was really into Nine Inch Nails for some reason,
Okay.
and I was digging into that, and that was a record with Teeth, and I think it's Dave Grohl on most of the record, if not all.
Okay.
Um, and so I just get into that, and I start thinking like it excites me, so I try and ride those waves.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things I was going to ask you is what do you think is missing from music education? But I bet you're probably going to say listening.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's the
Yeah.
thing that's well, at least it's the thing that I think is spoken about the least.
Mm.
Um,
How do you think more people should listen?
well, I think consciously should
Yeah.
should actively listen to something. But I remember asking that question to somebody when I was younger, but like, how should I listen to this? Because I think probably like a lot of us musicians, our mind, is definitely wandering around sometimes.
Yeah.
And I've definitely been in situations listening to something and come back halfway through the song, but I feel like I just wasn't even there.
Yeah. Where? Oh shit! Where are we?
Yeah, yeah. Um, so yeah, I just try and actively listen to exactly what's going on. But from a drummer's point of view, I think when I was a teenager, even early 20s, I was just listening to the drums. That's all I cared about,
Yeah.
which served its purpose and it was great and it inspired me. And I think that's key. But it's when you start listening to the other instruments and what's their place in the whole thing and why, maybe hearing the guitar is the reason that's the snare part or whatever.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Everything, I just think that sometimes it is missed where we think, oh, let's just be technical. I also think that I'm in danger of like being that slightly older guy now of going like, oh, the youngsters. But I I do fear that people coming up, not everybody, of course, but there's a big there's a lot of weight on social media now, and of course that completely serves its purpose as well. I think it has really does have a place.
Yeah.
But if somebody's just interested in doing a big fill with a backflip, I don't know. I just feel like it's not very. I don't know what it has to do with actual music sometimes. So if everyone's always focusing on this big thing to be like this exciting thing, I think sometimes the point of playing time, feel, groove, sound, all those things, I think sometimes they can be forgotten.
Mm.
So that's why I think, in my opinion, that listening is a really key thing that anybody coming up and is keen to grow as a musician is to listen to as much as possible and actively try and pull it apart and think what's going on.
Mm.
And I mean, one of my favorite guitarists, Francois Fasano. I'm sure you know Francois or know
No.
of. Okay. Uh,
I'm 2 for 2 at the moment.
oh, that's fine. Well, I used to live with Francois, and he's unbelievable, unbelievable player. Like the way that he can play fusion, but he can play jazz and he can play blues. And I've done a rock gig with him that he was like, I mean, it was unbelievable. Honestly, I've never heard him not sound like he's supposed to be there.
Okay.
It's like I think for most of us, like I have like my area that I probably feel most comfortable in.
Yeah.
But anyway, he always sounded amazing. But what was really great with living with him is that he was constantly listening to something. If he wasn't playing, he was listening.
Yeah.
Even if it was listening to a podcast or a record or a
Mm.
live album or someone talking about sound on YouTube, he was so in to like everything. They just he just understands music on another level. So that
Okay.
always really inspired me, and I was always really into listening to music. I always have been for years. Um, but it was the way that he spoke about actively listening.
Yes.
Like,
Yes. Actively listening.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
No, it's cool.
So yeah, I feel like that about educational learning is let's not forget why we're doing it. Of course, you might be a player that is wanting to do workshops and clinics and things like that, and that has again that's a different kind of thing. But if you want to be a musician and be musical and be employable, then I think listening and understanding is going to be key. So I mean that from a learning perspective, but I also really mean it from a playing.
Yeah.
Like I think if you're playing in a band, but like first rule is listen. In my opinion, like it's and we've all been in settings where someone's like got their head down,
Mm.
and you're like, we're not going to play together. We're not listening,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so I think we all have a responsibility to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I would say actually one of the guys that taught me that was probably Donovan Hepburn, who great friend of mine and amazing drummer, one of my favourites. But he was my first MD when I moved to London,
Okay.
and he was just teaching me about listening to what's going on, not just come and play the drums and play the part. Like listen to what's going on around you. Listen to what the groove in the pocket is on the track.
Mm.
Like because the gig we had click and track. Well, if there's loads of percussion going on, then you want to lock to that. There's the groove. So
Mm.
Donovan taught me a lot. Um, yeah, he's always actually been really good to me, and I feel like he really really helped me grow. So I think I've been very lucky over the years that either people have seen something in me, or they like my attitude, or we've just got on. But I feel like I've had people that have really kind of fought in my corner and helped me grow. And look, I think remember moving to London, and there was certainly some really challenging situations just out of my depth.
Okay. Like
Because
what?
well, there were new experiences. I remember calling my mum. So I'd only just moved to London. This was 2013, and I got a call for a gig, and I wasn't basically. The best way I would say it is I I think I tried to bring something that I thought I was supposed to bring.
Mm-hmm.
I think I dumbed down the version of me and went, "Oh, I think it needs to be this. I think
Yeah.
pop is supposed to be this."
Right.
And I didn't have the experience, so like I was naive to that. I was a bit green, so anyway, I just felt out of my depth, and I was getting asked to do things that I didn't really understand at the time. Like the questions were like, "Oh, can you play behind the beat? Can you make it feel like this? Can you make it feel lazy?" And all these
Mm.
things. I'm like, no one's ever asked me that. How do I do that? I also, and people, good or bad stuff is said from people about colleges and unis. Everyone has a different experience. I think the key thing is what you put into it.
Yeah.
But definitely something that I missed out by not going. So I had great experiences playing with bands and gigging and doing some short, small tours, and that's a really great experience. But never had I been told about playing behind or groove or feel or time.
Yeah.
They were things that I really feel like I had to learn on the job. So I certainly felt like I was challenged early on, and I remember calling my mum. I'd only been in London, a couple, 2 or 3 months, and I was like, "Mum, I feel like I've been playing Championship football, and I've just moved to the Premier League, and I'm just trying to swim. Like I'm just trying
Yeah.
to."
Keep
Because
your head above water.
it felt like that. If I'm honest, but in hindsight now, I believe the best way to grow is being put in some situations that are challenging. And I kind of have a rule that if someone says, "Can you do this?" Go, "Yeah,
Yep, I
I,
can, and then figure out what it is.
yeah." I mean, I'm not talking. For example, let's say you don't play jazz, and someone says, "Do you want to come and play in this jazz trio?" That's heavy
Mm.
jazz trio in Ronnie's. I'm not saying say yes to that. I'm saying like a situation where you're in a studio and someone says, "Oh, the floor tom sounds a bit like a basketball. Can you change that?" And if you don't know how, you
Mm.
still say yes.
Yeah.
You just go, "Yeah, no problem." And you turn that drum key and you go, "Oh, that's making it worse. I'll turn it the other way." You know
Yeah.
what? I think those are the best ways to learn under pressure.
Yeah.
Um, and we all have different ways of, finding our way to where we need to get to, right? So I think
Mm.
that's kind of would be my take on it. I think.
Yeah. I think it was Rick Rubin who said that something along the lines of never say no to anything. If you haven't done it, just say no, I haven't done it yet, and just figure it out.
Well, I think definitely having a positive spin on it. I really believe in that. I don't know if I could give a good example, but yeah, I mean, you probably hit a nail on the head with the Rick Rubin thing. Like he's not yet. Well, it's
Yeah.
very suggestive to be like,
And he
I'm
said,
definitely.
yeah, I can give it a good go.
Yeah, so I do believe in that kind of positive view on it. Also, like nobody wants to be in a situation where they ask you to do something and you go, "Oh, I don't know how." Like people, I think I feel the same about why we enjoy certain players is conviction and confidence,
Mm.
right? Whether that is walking into a room and someone goes, "I feel comfortable around this person," or
Yeah.
if you're on stage and you're like, "I know exactly where that bass player is playing that."
Yeah.
Whatever that scenario is, I think people really gravitate towards conviction and confidence.
Mm.
So I really believe in if you're going to do something, just be like, "Yep, that's where I'm putting it."
Yeah.
Of course, you got to have room for somebody to be like, "Oh, can you do this?" You're like, "Yeah, sure." But at least if you go like if you own it, I think people tend to go, "Yeah, that's right,"
Yeah.
because you believe it so much. So I think there's something to be said about that belief in every single note that we play.
Yeah.
I think people feel that.
Yeah.
Do
No, I
you
agree.
find that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think there is something to be said about, if you're going to hit something, hit it with some conviction. It's better to hit it, at least, yeah, if you hit it wrong and you hit a wrong note or an out of key note or a note that maybe isn't there, but you hit it with some conviction. If you play it again, no, the first time it's a mistake, but the second time it's an intentional thing.
Well, it depends. Depends how bad it is, I guess. Because
But
yeah,
then you could use that as a stepping stone into something more interesting.
yeah,
I know on guitar, if I hit a wrong note, if I'm on a lead break or something, and I hit, a note that, well, let's not call it a wrong note, let's call it an interesting note. I'm only a semitone away from a slightly more pleasing note.
yeah.
So I could use that to my advantage, and I could maybe come up with something a little more interesting than just hitting a wrong note and going, "Oh shit! Oh fuck!"
Yeah. You
I
also get
can,
the advantage of just hitting roll note and going, yeah, there's the right
yeah,
one.
yeah. Or
But,
just start to bend the note. Yeah,
whereas the drums, I feel like it's bang, oh, that was wrong. Like there's no hiding.
yeah, yeah.
There's
I
absolutely
guess I'm sure that there's ways around it, but the other thing I was going to talk about is social media. You mentioned it. It's kind of a necessity. I don't know what it's like for drummers, but for guitar players, there's a almost like a clique of these guitar players that will post stuff and it's played flawlessly, perfectly, and it's no, it's always like staggering, like it's like jaw dropping, and you kind of feel like you don't want to post anything yourself because it's not up to that kind of standard. But what you don't ever see is the hours and hours and hours and days and months and weeks or whatever going into perfecting that one 15-second clip. Do you ever feel with sort of posting stuff on social media that it has to be absolutely spot on perfect and there's no room for errors or mistakes?
No, I don't. But I do think that what we present, if you're putting it out there to everybody, you've got to be happy with what you're presenting.
Yeah.
I don't know if I believe in perfection, or there are certainly players out there that I think we all go, wow, like I think anybody in the world hears a Jeff Beccaro thing or
Yeah.
Dave Grohl or Steve Jordan, and there's lots of other fantastic greats, obviously, that everyone goes, oh, that just makes me move, and there's kind of no question.
Mm.
But I don't know. I think it should be genuine and authentic. But I also think, look, it's your page, and you can post what you want. I really think it's become the online TV. I know people talk about this a lot. I
Yeah.
had a meeting last week with somebody that wanted me to go on tour with them later in the year. And the first thing when we got chatting, they were like, "Oh, we love you playing. We've checked out your playing." They'd already seen me play.
Yeah.
They'd already gone to my Instagram at that point. They just wanted to talk to me and get to know me and make sure there was a connection and all those things. So I think it's really important that we are comfortable with what we're presenting online.
Hmm.
So yes, I think that for me, like the quality control, like I'm in charge of that. And I
Yeah.
think that's the thing is that as us as musicians, we also do our own marketing. We look after our quality control. Our customer service. We also trying to find the next gig, and so there's so much that what we do. So yeah, for me, no, I'm not looking for perfection with what I post.
Yeah.
I I think social media evolves as well really quickly. So I hope that the stuff I post is interesting and maybe somewhat educational.
Hmm.
So I think maybe the better question for me to see something like that is who am I posting it for?
Right.
So because everyone's different, right? Um, if you are wanting to be massive on social media or have a YouTube following that you feel that can bring in a revenue for you, then you probably have to be really critical about your playing because you want people to be like, I want to learn with this person.
Yeah.
Whereas if you want younger musicians to maybe come and get some one-to-one lessons with you, you want them to see your stuff and be like, wow, I find that really interesting. I'd love to know how he does that.
Mm.
So there has to be like an educational or inspiring sort of like format to it. So for me, my social media is for anyone that potentially might want to work with me. Um, that I hope that they can look at my page and go, okay, we can get a good idea of who I am.
Yeah.
Whether that is my playing, but that's going to be really important for them to see that. Whether that's the way I look and my style, whatever those things are, I hope that they can come to my page and it'll be, yeah, I think he fits the bill or he doesn't.
Mm.
So back to the perfection thing, or like, does it have to be perfect? It might, for me, no. I think I like to try and give like a genuine thing of what I'm up to that might be interesting to some people. Um, but I have quality control where I go, if I don't think it sounds good, of course I'm not going to put it up.
Yeah,
That would
yeah.
feel really
Yeah, I
bizarre.
mean, I wasn't suggesting that we put things up that's out of tune, out of time, that you just made a hash of it. But I think there's also there's the control that we don't have. If you're on a gig or on a show or someone else is filming you, do you want to sort of step out and try new things, or do you try to hold yourself back because you're like, oh, okay, somebody might be filming this, so I'll just keep it safe.
You mean like in a real
Yeah,
live?
if you're on a show, you're doing a gig, you're on tour. Do you ever want to step out and think, oh, do you know, I've been working on this. I'm going to see if I can maybe try and see if I can get it to work here. Although, no, someone's might be filming, so I don't want to fuck up. So I'll just play it safe.
Well, I'd be more concerned about the person I'm working with rather than the person filming. I don't. I don't think. I don't think it's possible to do a gig these days without somebody filming.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to get over that one pretty quickly, as a general rule for that. But I'm not. I'm very. I'm not the kind of player that is. Let's say I'm booked on a gig, and whatever that gig is. But let's say I'm working with an artist, for an artist, for a band.
Mm,
I'm there to do a great, safe job. That I'm not going to be chucking something in that I might not be able to do.
right. Yeah.
I'm going to be playing very much within what I can deliver.
Okay.
Whereas if we're talking about, in fact, I remember, I think you sent me a video. I was doing a blues gig, so this is obviously a completely different setting.
Mm.
And often I get called a solo in a blues gig. And you'd sent me the video. You said, "Hey, my mate was at the gig." Do you
Yes. Yeah.
remember
Yes.
that? I don't know weirdly why I remember that. But I'm actually, in that instance, I'm really glad it was captured because I felt like I did a good solo.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's always when you're given the opportunity to kind of like, right, you've got the spotlight for a minute. You get to express yourself. You can kind of, you've got free reign. I think I don't know how it is for drummers for solos, but for guitar players or instrumentalists, you might think, okay, well, if I've got free reign here, how far do I want to venture out? How do I want to express myself musically, or do I want to play it safe? Because I might venture out a little bit, and I may go too far, and people will be overly critical. It might not quite work, but it's a kind of a blues jam thing that we're doing, or it's an open mic, or anything like that. But if I step too far out, are people going to be overly critical because of their experience with my instrument on social media being perfect all the time? That's kind of more what I was aiming at.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. So kind of having that freedom to express.
Mm,
On that note, sort of quickly back on the video you said about the solo thing I did. The reason I was like, I'm glad this is going to feel like a good solo is because the other 99% of the time I don't feel like it's a good solo.
yeah.
So and genuinely, if you ask me like how drummers feel, I can't speak for everybody, but how I feel when it comes to solos, hate it.
Right.
Because look, I mean, of all the different kind of gigs I do, the only gig I'm doing a solo on is a blues gig, blues rock gig.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
I'm probably doing one, maybe two blues rock gigs a month. So it isn't something that I'm constantly working on. And yeah, I just don't think I'm great at soloing.
Okay.
That's also my responsibility to make that better if I want to.
Okay.
And I'm happily will be accountable for that. But yeah, I feel absolutely terrible. But in terms of the videoing thing, yeah, of course. But I feel like the video thing is, oh yeah, okay, it goes up online and more people see it. And yeah, sometimes people share stuff and put it on a story and they go, oh, I don't know if that really captured the evening.
Yeah.
There's some one of my favorite players to play with, Frankie,
Mm.
but he's all about like on the spot, playing off each other, loud. When you're in the room and you see Frankie play guitar and you hear him sing, everybody goes, "Wow!" You see it on the
Okay.
video. It's kind of it's not quite the same. So sometimes in the video you'd be like, "Oh, I'm not saying Frankie, but anyone could be like, oh, he just caught a wrong note there." On the gig, probably no one even noticed.
Yeah, yeah,
Everyone's up to 11 at that point anyway.
yeah.
So I often think that the video thing can be an unfair thing on both sides, right? It can be
Mm.
unfair because we can take 4 weeks to record 15 seconds.
Yeah,
That's unfair and that's not very genuine. It can
yeah,
be another side where it can sound really great and you're in the room and everyone's like, wow, this is great. And someone takes 15 seconds where you just happen to catch two bum notes. Like,
yeah, yeah.
that's also unfair. So, but no, Mike, I don't think about videos. Maybe I will now we've had this
Oh
conversation.
shit, sorry.
Uh,
But I had a great interview with a great guitar player who said something along the lines of um, being in the studio and doing it in the studio is doing it in the studio. Being on stage and doing it on stage is doing it on stage. On stage, you're there to do a show, and who the fuck wants to hear it perfectly? You're about doing the show. It's about doing a performance. It's about people getting their money's worth. And if you hit a wrong note, so fucking what? It's gone. It's happened. It's gone. Goodbye. We'll move on to the next thing. And I think there's something to be said for, I think, more people trying to live a little bit more dangerously on stage and trying new things. Even if it doesn't have to be like a massive technical thing that you've done. It could just be just trying something new because you want to express yourself in a different way. And I think people are maybe too scared to step into that new zone because it's for fear of being, exposed on social media and shit like that.
yeah, I think your friend's absolutely right in terms of like they're two different beasts, the studio and the
Mm.
live.
Oh, he's not my friend. I wish he was. He's
We call him your friend.
not.
Um, but what I would say, yes, I agree with that in the sense of you're not having wrong notes, let's call them wrong notes on a record,
Yeah,
but you still want to capture the energy.
yeah,
And you're right, the energy might be very different from live to studio. I still think both is capturing an energy, but
hmm,
yeah, if you're live and there's something that's not quite wouldn't make it on the record, yeah, like who it's a moment,
yeah,
so I really, yeah, I do agree with that. For the, it is about capturing that energy. Look, I think it depends on the gig.
yeah,
If we're talking blues, jazz gig, and it's about expressing and bouncing off each other,
mm,
absolutely, go wild. You know, but if you're on a gig that you've been called in and that the job they want done is this specific job,
yeah,
go and do that job, and we don't need to. Shouldn't be stretching out if you're not supposed to.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
That being said, I believe in obviously bringing yourself to the table, and I think there's room on most gigs to have at least have your personality on stage. In
definitely,
terms
yeah,
of if you just play exactly what's on the record, well, what's to say someone can't just listen to that record at home, like
yeah,
your guitarist is saying. Um, so I always think that in my opinion, you have to really respect the music and the song and the environment. But I also think that you're called because they want you, and you should bring some of that character and personality. And I think that's important. Whatever
yeah,
we think that is of us, we should try and bring that and then bounce off each other. And sometimes that might mean something a little bit extra. But I think there's
mm,
a big difference between bringing like a little bit extra, what I'm calling it, opposed to like extra when we talk about Instagram or YouTube.
yeah,
We're not talking about, oh, should I add in 8.5 beat fill?
yeah,
Change the one. I
yeah,
just want to
yeah,
polyrhythms and all that stuff. Yeah, like there's time and place for that. It's in your bedroom, and if you want to stay in your bedroom, like stay there. But like, I think it comes back to the listening thing we spoke about earlier.
mm,
Is if we're listening on stage, if we've listened a lot off the stage and then we listen a lot on the stage, I think it helps us make the right decisions. Is
yeah,
how I feel about it.
yeah. I think that's the difference between people who play an instrument and people who are musicians.
Yeah, yeah.
So, anyway, so what have you got lined up for the rest of the year? I know you're doing the Echo Belly tour. Anything else coming up that you're looking forward to?
Yeah. Yes, I've got recording this week, and then I go on the road with Waiting for Smith for a bit in Europe.
Okay.
Then I come back and go Ecobelly, And then summer festivals. I'm with Jake Shears again.
Oh, nice. How are they?
Brilliant,
They
Jake.
must. They look like a lot of fun.
Do you know what they are? The answer
Yeah.
is yes. But I remember the first show I did with Jake, which was last year.
Mm.
So we'd had a bunch of rehearsals, and it was great. We were all really enjoying it. It was a vibe, and then we go up and we do our first show. So the whole show started with band are up there, couple hits,
Hmm.
introduced to the crowd, I guess, essentially. And then we start playing the groove of the first song, and then Jake runs on, and he's just got so much energy that I hadn't, because we'd only rehearsed, we hadn't
Yeah.
our first show. I didn't know how he was gonna come on stage, and I couldn't help but smile
Mm.
because firstly I had no idea he was going to run on stage with that much energy. Also, you try and be on stage with Jake and not enjoy that
Yeah.
because he's just a joy to watch, a real pro. He's
Yeah.
been around and done some amazing things. Like I felt very privileged to do Glastonbury with him last year because he'd obviously done Glastonbury before with Scissor Sisters,
Yeah.
and who are obviously such an iconic band. That it felt a real privilege to be up there with him, and yeah, they're brilliant. That one we're playing his new record that he released last year.
Hmm.
Great, I really love that. It's got a bit more of a disco vibe to it, disco dance kind of thing to it. We played one or two off his first solo record, and then we played a load of scissor hits.
Yeah.
Getting to play Laura and Take Your Mama and
Yeah. Yeah.
Filthy Gorgeous, like it's amazing watching the crowd kind of go mad for that stuff. So
It's cool.
yeah, I had a really amazing experience. So yeah, back out with Jake this year.
Wicked.
I've been to some great festivals. And then, I've got a few records in between. I'm doing a theatre thing in the March abroad. And then in October, I'm with Nick Hayward from Haircut 100.
Nice.
So,
Very
yeah,
nice.
and everything in between, like jumping on blues stuff. There'll be some
Hmm.
corporate stuff. Yeah, I feel very, very fortunate. I've got a lot of things to look forward to. And I think things are tough right now in terms of cost of living
Yeah.
and I think that the industry is probably struggling as a whole.
Hmm.
um so yeah, I never take it for granted. I still get as excited now when I get a call or an email, whatever, as I did when I first moved to London. Like, I still get really, really excited about that, and
That's
I
cool.
genuine, like I really do. It feels really good, and like I said, it's the biggest compliment when someone says, I think you'd really suit what we're doing. Do you want to come and do this with us?
Yeah.
That's that's really, really exciting. So yeah, I feel very lucky, and I definitely appreciate all the stuff I've been lucky to do. I think.
Yeah. Long may it continue. No, it's well deserved because I think you're a great player. You're lovely to be around, and I think everything that you've got and will continue to get is a testament to that.
Thank you, mate. I appreciate that. What about
Cool.
you?
Well,
What about yourself? How are you feeling about your year? How's it started? Are you feeling okay?
started the same as every year, quiet, and then you start putting yourself forward for shows and auditions, and then you, as the months sort of creep on, you go, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have done that. But yeah,
In
yeah,
what way
yeah.
should have done? Should have done what?
Well, I put myself forward for some function band auditions, and I was like, oh, no, no, and I just called the guy up, and said, no, I can't. It's not. It's not where my energy wants to be. But because
You know,
January, you only have 2 gigs in January or 3 gigs in January, you start to sort of scratch yourself and you start going a bit, fuck, what do I need to be a bit more proactive? But
well, this is great that you've been doing this, and I've been keeping an eye on this stuff on your socials, and
this is doing really well.
some
I've been
great
really
people
really
come on here
pleased
as
with it.
well.
Say that
You,
again, sorry.
you've had some really great people come on in, and like seeing like Smiley on here and
Yeah,
people like that. Like that, some really great people come on here. So
yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, I think venturing into the world of theatres is going to be kind of the theme of the year. So I landed Legally Blonde and Grease
great, man.
in
That's really
in for
cool.
April. So that's, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Like Legally Blonde is, the charts are just kicking the shit out of me. It's proper like 8-minute songs, key changes every 10 bars or so. and it's oh man,
That's
but
great. That's
but
great. We were talking about that before. Like giving yourself a roast and a challenge is,
mm,
I think, can be quite good fun. It's not fun when it's like, can you do this tomorrow? And you're like,
yeah,
oh yeah.
no,
But if someone's going like, hey, we've got this in April and you've got time. Like,
mm,
also, I think what's really nice with what we do is we're very lucky to enjoy our job. Firstly,
yeah, yeah,
there's not many people who can say that. So I think that's an amazing thing. But
mm,
also the fact that a phone call can come in tomorrow and suddenly everything's changed. You're like, you what? You know, I'm going to be doing this, amazing and
yeah,
excited or
yeah,
whatever. But also to be working, a couple months in advance, and you're going, you're really excited about these two shows. Well,
yeah,
that's really fun. Like I think to be learning something that you're excited to do, and that's 2 months away. How many people go to work and go, I can't wait to April to do this thing?
yeah, yeah,
We are very lucky in that sense, and that's not to ever suggest that musicians shouldn't be valued, because I really believe in the value of what we do.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but certainly, yeah, very lucky to go like, oh wow, I'm excited about that. Like that's kind of mad, isn't it?
Mm.
So
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, like it's excited and nervous. But I think when you start to step out of those little comfort zones, that's when, like you mentioned, that's where we grow. That's where we
yeah,
expand ourselves.
you'll be great. You've got the time as well. And look, I think that one of the key things is you want to do it, and
Yeah,
I think that's the difference in terms of what we do. When there's something you really want to do, it just
mm.
makes the learning process a lot easier.
Yeah,
So
yes,
again, on that note, in terms of like we were talking about learning and things like that, I feel like if you're really forcing something down you to be like, oh, I have to learn this,
yeah,
I believe in everything has its place to improve us, but learning can be so much better when it's like, I really want to do this,
yeah,
and if you want to,
absolutely.
it becomes a lot easier,
Yeah, cool, mate. I think we're going to leave it there. I think that's been
Amazing.
it's been wonderful. It's been great to chat.